Welcome to God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson. Reach him at GodsFiveMinutes@gmail.com. Now, here's Ed Wilson with God's 5 Minutes.
Hello, friends. Ecclesiastes 3, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. Time to be born, time to die, plan to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted. Here before us stands this great, solemn law of retribution in which two things lie. The results of all sowing are similar in kind and more in number. And so be sure that you will find out that all your past lives on into your present, and that the present, in fact, is very little more than the outcome of the past. What you plant as a youth, you will reap as a grown-up. This mysterious life of ours is all sowing and reaping intermingled right to the very end. Each action is in turn the child of all the preceding and the parent of all that follows. There are a great many things in the past of nearly any older person they would change if they could, but there they stand, and nothing can do away the marks of that which once has been. And here is what you have to reap. You will have the enlarged growth from your present characteristics. Someone takes a picture, half the size of the palm of his hand, and then through digital magic enlarges it to any size he pleases. And that is what life does for all of us. The pictures drawn small on the young person's imagination, be they angels or beasts, are permanent, and they'll get bigger and bigger and bigger as you get older. And you will reap the increased dominion of your early habits. There's a grim verse in the book of Proverbs that speaks about a man being tied and bound by the chains of his sins. And that is just saying that the things which you choose to do when you are a boy, many of them you'll have to do when you're a man, because you've lost the power, though sometimes not the will, of doing anything else. There are people who sow the wind, and they do not reap the wind, but the law of increase comes in and they reap the tornado. There are some of you that are sowing to the flesh, and as surely as God lives, you will of the flesh reap corruption. Whatsoever a man soweth, that even here shall he also reap. Nor is that law of inheriting the fruit of our doings limited to this experience of life. Whenever conscience is awakened, it at once testifies not only of a broken law, but of a living lawgiver, and not only of retribution here, but of retribution hereafter. Retribution cannot stop on this side of the grave, and if you are going yonder, you are carrying with you the necessity of yourself of inheriting the results of your life here. Don't put away such thoughts as this with the notion that I am holding before you some antiquated doctrine fit only to scare old women and children. The writer of the book of Ecclesiastes was no weak-minded, superstitious fanatic. He was far more disposed to skepticism than to fanaticism. But for all that, with all his sympathy for young people's breadth and liberality, his tolerance for all sorts and ways of living, his doubts and questionings, he came to this, and this was his teaching to the young people whom in idea he had gathered round his chair. Rejoice, O young man, in thy youth, and let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth, and walk in the ways of thine heart, and in the sight of thine own eyes. By all means, God has put you into a fair world, and meant for you to get all the good out of it. But know thou that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment, and shape your character accordingly. It's especially important to ponder these things, because unless you do, you will certainly go wrong. If you don't plant good, somebody else will plant evil. An untilled field is not a field where nothing grows. It's a field full of weeds, and the world and the flesh and the devil, the temptations around about you and the evil tendencies inside you, unless they're well kept down and kept off, are sure to fill your soul full of all manner of seeds that will spring up to bitterness and poison and death. Think deeply of the way you build your life and your character. It's the only chance of keeping your heart from being full of wickedness. Think what you're sowing, and think what the harvest will be. Maybe somebody's listening today, sowing to the flesh, young people living impure and wicked lives, bones full of the sins of their youth. Some are perhaps letting every wind bring the thistledown of vanities and scatter them all across their heart. They may spring up prickly and gifted with a fatal power of self-multiplication. Don't be so. Talk to God.
You have been listening to God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson. Reach him by email at GodsFiveMinutes@gmail.com. Tune in next time to hear more encouraging thoughts from God's Word on God's 5 Minutes with Pastor Ed Wilson.
God's Word speaks truth. God's Word speaks life. And God's Word speaks to us today. Hi, I'm Pastor John Mehrens of the Granby Christian Church. Each week we explore God's Word together on In the Shadow of Your Wings, a radio broadcast on KNEO. Tune in each Saturday at 6:45 p.m. to hear the show. And if you ever miss it, you can always view the archive online at kneo.org. We also have the program available as a podcast as well, so you can listen anytime, anywhere. It's available from Sky High Podcast Network. I invite you to check out the show and learn more about our incredible God and how He cares for you. You can trust Him, you can depend on Him, and you can rest in the shadow of His wings.